Ever feel like you're juggling chainsaws? And at the same time, you're trying to wrangle like a room full of toddlers.
Okay, I think I see where you're going with this.
That's what it can feel like to manage a ton of servers, right?
Yeah, I can see the analogy working.
Supermicro gets it, though. They know IT admins have a tough job, so they've put together this whole suite of systems management tools.
Yeah, they're trying to bring some order to the chaos of the data center.
We're taking a deep dive today into Supermicro's systems management world.
It's kind of like a crash course in, you know, taming those wild servers.
Exactly.
We're going to be talking about everything from managing just a single server to, massive cloud-connected data centers.
So what makes Supermicro's approach stand out?
Well, they offer a ton of different options, which is nice. So it's not a one-size-fits-all situation. They really let you tailor the solution to your needs.
So it's more like a bespoke suit for your IT infrastructure.
Yeah, exactly. Let's start with their main management platform, Supermicro Server Manager, or SSM for short.
SSM, so this is like the central hub for keeping an eye on all your Supermicro servers.
You got it. SSM gives you this centralized console view. It's a single dashboard, basically, to monitor and manage all those servers. But, and this is key, SSM is flexible. You can use it with REST APIs, or there's a really user-friendly web interface.
Got it. So whether you live and breathe on the command line or, prefer clicking buttons, SSM has you covered.
Exactly.
Now, there's something here in my notes that screams efficiency. Agentless nodes. What's the deal with that? It sounds kind of futuristic to me.
Right. You don't need to install individual software agents on every single server that you want to manage with SSM.
Okay, hold on a sec. For those of us who, haven't really dived headfirst into the server management world, why is that such a big deal?
Well, think about it, right? If you've got, say, 100 servers, that could mean 100 installations, configurations. That's a lot of potential points of failure. With SSM, you can just say goodbye to that headache. Saves you so much time.
So SSM sounds like a dream for wrangling a smaller set of servers. But what about when you're dealing with a data center that's closer to, like, a server city?
That's where Supermicro's cloud management platform comes in, SuperCloud Composer, SCC.
SCC, okay. Give us the rundown. What makes this different from SSM?
Well, if you think of SSM as your trusty Swiss Army knife for individual servers, SCC is more like having a whole team of very skilled orchestra conductors for your data center.
I like that analogy.
Yeah, and get this. It doesn't just handle your physical servers. It can manage virtual machines, even cloud instances on different providers.
So we're talking about managing a real mix of on-premise servers, virtual environments, even cloud workloads.
From one place.
Wow, that is incredibly useful. More and more companies are trying to figure out this whole hybrid cloud thing.
Oh, for sure. Hybrid cloud is like the name of the game these days, and SCC is ready to play. You've got the power to manage your whole infrastructure from one place. Really doesn't matter where those workloads are running.
Now that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Getting ahead of the curve. Okay, but SCC has even more up its sleeve, right?
Yeah.
I've got something in my notes about composable disaggregated infrastructure. Honestly, that's a mouthful.
I know, it's a bit of a mouthful. So imagine this. Your data center resources, all the processing power, the storage, the networking, all of it is broken down. So you've got all these individual building blocks. Composable disaggregated infrastructure lets you take those blocks and put them together in different ways, kind of like high-tech Legos.
Okay, that's actually a really cool way to think about it.
Yeah.
So instead of having these dedicated servers with fixed resources, you can just build what you need.
Exactly. So you can assemble and reassemble as needed, depending on what your applications need.
And SEC is what makes this whole process actually, possible.
SCC is the maestro, orchestrating the whole thing. Imagine a data center that can basically reconfigure itself on the fly to meet whatever demands are thrown at it.
Talk about efficiency. This kind of flexibility has to be a game changer, both for optimizing your resources and for keeping those hardware costs down.
Absolutely. It's about making sure that you are getting the most out of that hardware. Nobody wants to be stuck over provisioning.
Right, right. Now, SSM and SEC, those are kind of the stars of the show, but Supermicro also has this whole supporting cast of utilities, right? Tools to fine-tune your server operations even more.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
All right, let's shine a light on some of these unsung heroes of the data center. What other tools should we have on our radar?
So there's Supermicro Update Manager, or SUM, which makes sure all your server firmware is up to date. BIOS, BMC, all that important stuff. Then you've got Supermicro Power Manager, or SPM, which, you guessed it, helps monitor and optimize your power consumption.
Okay, so SUM keeps those servers' brains from getting buggy, and then SPM keeps those electricity bills from giving you a heart attack.
Got it.
What else is in Supermicro's toolkit? So we've got SUM taking care of firmware updates and SPM keeping those energy bills in check. But what about those times when, a server just decides to take a nap, goes offline? Supermicro has tools to help us figure out what's going on in those situations, right?
Of course, they've got you covered for those, oh no, why is the server down moments. First up, we've got the classics, IPMI utilities.
IPMI. Okay, I've definitely heard that acronym thrown around. What makes these tools so essential?
Yeah, IPMI stands for Intelligent Platform Management Interface. It's basically a way to manage and monitor your servers remotely, even when they're, being difficult, refusing to boot up.
So it's like a backdoor into your server when the front door is totally jammed.
Exactly. And even though IPMI utilities have been around for a while, they're still super valuable for that essential out-of-band server management. But Supermicro doesn't stop there. They also have SuperDoctor 5.
Okay, now that one rings a bell. SuperDoctor 5. Tell me more.
This tool is like having a whole team of really attentive nurses, and they are constantly monitoring your server's vital signs, making sure everything is okay.
Okay, now you've really got my attention. What kind of things are we talking about here?
Everything. Temperatures, fan speeds, voltage levels, even the status of your hard drives. SuperDoctor 5 is keeping an eye on it all in real time. And here's the best part. If anything starts to go even a little bit off, you get an alert immediately.
It's like having an early warning system for your data center. That could be a lifesaver.
Exactly. And that brings us to another really interesting tool they have, Thin Agent Service, or TESS.
TESS. Okay, this one sounds familiar. Refresh my memory. What's so special about this one?
So TESS is this really clever solution for older servers. You see, not all servers have the most up-to-date RAID controllers.
RAID controllers, those are the things that help, keep our data safe, right? Preventing those dreaded crashes.
Yes, exactly. They manage all the hard drives in the server to prevent data loss. But some older servers, they might not have RAID controllers that can communicate directly with the BMC.
The BMC, that's like the server's built-in management system, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So how do you get those older servers to report their status, their vital signs, if their RAID controllers aren't playing nicely with the newer management tools?
That is where TAS comes in. TAS runs on the server, and it's like a translator, a go-between. It grabs all the information from the RAID controller, then it feeds that to the BMC, so you still get those critical storage health updates.
Like a universal translator for your server components. It's really impressive, the lengths they've gone to.
They've thought of everything.
Okay, so we've talked about tools, but what about the brains behind all of this? Supermicro's onboard BMCs. I've heard they pack a lot of power into those little chips.
Oh, yeah. They take their BMCs seriously. We're not talking about some basic management controller here. These things have advanced features, system health monitoring, remote power control. They even have enhanced storage monitoring.
Wow. It's like having a tiny data center command center, but right there on the motherboard. So with IPMI, SuperDoctor 5, these really smart BMCs, it seems like Supermicro's got everything covered. Monitoring, catching potential problems early on. But what about when you do need to dig in and get your hands dirty, do some serious hardware diagnostics? Do they have tools for that?
For sure. For those situations where you really need to roll up your sleeves and do a deep dive on the hardware, there's Super Diagnostics Offline, or SDO.
SDO. Sounds intense. What makes this different from the other tools we've talked about?
SDO is for those times when you need to check out the server's hardware really, really thoroughly, often when the server's offline. It lets you run all sorts of tests on every single component. Processor, memory, storage, everything gets checked.
It's like giving your server a full physical exam at the doctor's office.
Exactly. It's super helpful for identifying any faulty components really precisely.
SDO sounds like it's got to be in every data center's toolkit.
Oh, definitely.
Okay, there's one more piece of the Supermicro management puzzle I want to make sure we get to. Redfish API. Can you tell us more about that?
Of course. Redfish is all about embracing open standards. It's a modern API, RESTful API, designed just for managing servers, all that data center equipment.
Okay, but for those of us who aren't fluent in API, what does that actually mean, and why should we care about Redfish?
Think of Redfish as a universal language for all these different vendors to use. In the past, you always had to deal with proprietary tools from each vendor, which could be a real pain. But with Redfish, you can manage servers from different companies, network switches, everything, all from one interface.
Now that's progress, a universal remote for the data center.
Exactly. And the good news is Supermicro is completely on board. They've integrated Redfish API support throughout everything, so you can manage your Supermicro servers alongside anything else that uses the standard.
It sounds like Redfish is a huge win in terms of flexibility, interoperability.
Absolutely. No more vendor silos.
Right. So to recap, Supermicro has these powerful, innovative tools like SSM, SEC, and SuperDoctor 5, and they also fully support these industry standards like Redfish.
Hmm?
But how does all of this stack up against the competition? Specifically, how do they compare to a giant like Dell in the world of data center management? We'll get into that right after this break. We are back and ready to wrap up our deep dive into Supermicro systems management.
Sounds good.
Right before the break, we were discussing how Supermicro measures up against the big players in the data center world, specifically Dell. There's that old saying in tech, nobody ever got fired for choosing IBM. I wonder if that's still true today, but with companies like Dell, is it always the safe bet to go with that established name? Or is Supermicro offering something different?
It's an interesting question for sure. I mean, Dell has been a huge name in data centers for a long time. But I think what we're seeing with Supermicro is like a fundamentally different approach.
Oh, really? How so?
Well, with Dell, it's more of a standardized thing. Like they have a set of server configurations, some management solutions, and that's that. Kind of like choosing from a menu at a restaurant. You've got options, but they're already decided.
Okay, I see what you mean.
With Supermicro, it's more like they're a chef who's going to work with you, create a custom dish.
Right, right. So it's that bespoke suit analogy again, but for servers this time.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And that customization comes in a few ways. First, their selection of servers is huge. Way more server SKUs than Dell, which is great. It gives you more choices when it comes to processors, memory, storage, networking. You can really fine-tune your hardware.
Yeah, it's like the difference between shopping at a huge department store and going to a specialist boutique.
Exactly. And beyond just the hardware, Supermicro gives you more control over how you manage everything, too. We talked about Redfish API, right? Perfect example of their commitment to open standards. They're not trying to lock you into their ecosystem.
Right, you've got
Means that
options.
You can use Supermicro servers with equipment from other vendors, use different management tools, even build your own custom solutions if that's what you're into.
So they play well with others, which is nice.
Exactly. It all comes back to that idea of choice, of customization. They want to give IT professionals the ability to build the infrastructure that works for them, not some generic solution.
Right, because one size fits all rarely actually fits anyone.
Exactly.
Now, we do have to talk about this, this elephant in the room. There was that report, I think it was last year, 2023, by Principal Technologies. They seem to really like Dell's management software over Supermicro's.
Right. I know the one you mean.
Can we unpack that a bit? What's the story there?
Yeah, so that report definitely got people talking, but, and this is important, the report was mainly focused on Dell's stuff compared to Supermicro's server manager, SSM.
Ah, okay, I'm with you. We've already established that SSM is really designed for single server management, not for a whole data center.
Exactly. It wouldn't be fair to compare, like, a bicycle and a Formula One race car.
Right. Totally different tools for different jobs.
For a fair comparison, you have to look at Supermicro's enterprise-grade platform, SuperCloud Composer, SEC.
Right, so it's an apples to oranges kind of situation.
Yeah.
The report wasn't wrong, it's just that there was a piece missing from the story.
Exactly. If you compare SEC to what Dell has for enterprise, like their open managed enterprise, it's a much closer race.
Okay, that makes sense.
In fact, a lot of the features that the report highlighted as missing from Supermicro were actually in SEC. They just weren't looking in the right place.
So all of this to say Supermicro can absolutely compete in that enterprise management space.
Oh, absolutely. They might not be as well known as Dell, but when you really look at what SEC can do, they're a serious contender.
That makes sense. Well, as we wrap things up here, what's the one big takeaway you want our listeners to remember about Supermicro systems management?
I think the most important thing is Supermicro is doing data center management differently. It's not just about the tools themselves. It's about giving IT pros the freedom to choose what works best for them,
Right.
letting them build the ideal infrastructure for their needs.
Recognizing that a one-size-fits-all approach just doesn't cut it in the data center.
Exactly. And that's only going to become more important in the future, right? With all the changes happening in technology, hybrid cloud, edge computing, AI.
It's a really exciting time to be working in IT, that's for sure. Well, I want to say a huge thank you to you, our expert, for walking us through the world of Supermicro systems management. You've given us a lot to think about.
It's been my pleasure. Always happy to nerd out about this stuff.
And to all of you listening out there, thanks for joining us on this journey. Until next time, keep exploring, stay curious, and remember, sometimes it's those lesser-known paths that lead to the most interesting discoveries.